Welcome to Farm Here Daily, a field forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Here Daily, with the recent U.S. EU trade agreement framework announcement, we'll go over the urgency within agriculture for trade agreements with Iowa Farm Bureau President Brent Johnson. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, we have Brent Johnson, president of the Iowa Farm Bureau, joining me. Brent, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to go over some trade talk here in the program. However, I did want to catch up. We are nearing September now, and I wanted to know how your family farm operation has been going. How's the year been so far?
Well, it's always good to be with you, David. This year's been it's been a roller coaster, to say the least. We had, of course, we fixed a drought, had some planting issues, dealt with some moisture along the way. Ultimately, most things lined up very, very well for the crops, and it looked like we were just going to absolutely have a bin buster, and we're still going to have a great crop, but like a large part of the Midwest, a lot of the diseases came in late and are really taking a toll. Some wet soils for a little too long, southern rust, a little bit of tar spot, a little bit of northern cornleaf blight. It's just sort of hampering our ability to get to the finish line. So still going to be a big crop, still going to have a lot of bushels to deal with, maybe just tamp down a little bit of expectations, but hopefully we've got enough bushels to market, and hopefully we've got some places to sell them.
I was going to ask you about the disease pressure, but you kind of answered that already. So we got to find some way to tell Mother Nature that, hey, this isn't a collection. This isn't a trading card game. Like we don't want to catch them and get them all.
That's unfortunately, that's a good way to put it this year. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen a disease pressure like this. I know myself, like most, a lot of the crops were sprayed with fungicide once. I was debating personally whether I should spray them again a second time, which hasn't been done in this part of the state before, and I didn't. Maybe I wish I would have. I guess we'll figure out. Some local guys did, so we'll see what the combine tales are later on at the coffee shop when we're all through, and see which decision this year was the right one to make. But there is certainly a lot of pressure right now.
Right, because that's such a huge part of the farming operation, is that level of margin. Yep. So is the ROI worth having Correct. That extra application? Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, a lot of conversations that I'm having with decision makers and folks in the administration right now on the national level. Inevitably, every conversation I have includes the concept of profitability. And, it's something that we haven't talked very well about in agriculture, specifically to our politicians and decision makers. But I think it's high time we need to talk about it. And they need to understand that profitability has been a challenge for many of the agriculture sectors. And here we are today. We've got some really challenging input conversations, and then these export and supply side dynamics are really strained right now. And so we need to, some of these trade conversations, we need to wrap them up, get some things in writing so that we know where our commodities are growing, because despite the diseases, despite the challenges of getting to the finish line, we're going to have a mountain of crops here to deal with. And whether it's domestic demand or international demand, we need to drive that side of the balance sheet.
Absolutely. As you were just mentioning, there's a lot of concerns about profitability. Soybeans really need China to buy. Corn, just announced this week, talks about how it's about 85 cents on average below the cost of production. A lot of challenges there. One of those avenues that farm has is trade. So let's move right into trade opportunities right now, because the Trump administration last week made the announcement that there was the EU, the European Union Framework announcement, which is an agreement on reciprocal, fair, and balanced trade. That's what they announced. What do we know about that? And, actually, if you could catch us up a little bit, we have been talking about trade agreements with the EU since TTIP. What is that? The Transatlantic Trade and Investment
Yeah.
Partnership, something like that. It's been a conversation for a while.
It's been a really long time, and with the EU specifically, many of those trade conversations have really come around this umbrella of non-tariff trade barriers. And some folks get confused as to what that means, and how is that different than a tariff trade barrier? And so really it has to do with management practices and just different policies of one fashion or another that gets in the way of either say GMO crops or however things are actually grown. And the EU specifically has had some challenges with the United States production styles, and so that has really hampered some of those relationships in the past. Now, move forward into today's era of trade, and of course, you need to add on all the tariff conversations, and President Trump and this administration is trying to right side some of those current and past trade discrepancies. And the way that this president sees that conversation happening is through a tool with tariffs. And so he's using that tool as he sees fit to try to mediate some of these misconceptions of some of these challenges that we've experienced with the EU and some other countries. And so it enters, it's kind of a push hard to push harder kind of conversation currently. And so here we are. It looks like the EU is at least interested in discovering some opportunities about some of those non-tariff trade barriers. And with that, I think the president's willing to negotiate some of the tariff impositions that he's placed on the EU. So if this plays out, the President Trump will be able to put that notch in his belt and be able to right size some relationships with the EU. The EU is, they're a friendly as far as relationships with the states goes. I mean, it's a friendly conversation. They are our allies in so many other stages. It's just when it comes to trade, we've got some misalignments, if you will, and so I think we got some opportunities. Hopefully, we can continue these conversations, get this framework filled in with a lot of the details that are missing so far that are being negotiated today, and be able to push some of these agreements, the EU and some of those others across the finish line, and again bring back some demand for the commodities and products that the United States grows.
Speaking of that, the big part of that framework announcement was them saying the EU will eliminate tariffs on most of their goods, if not, I think, all U.S. industrial goods. How might that affect our farmers here in the Midwest in this state?
Yeah. Well, the EU, they've brought in they've exported much more to the United States than they've brought in from the United States. And so we've had this dollar for dollar trade deficit. A good example, say like in the pork industry, just pork products themselves. I think the number is the U.S. has imported $650 million of pork products. Okay, so there's one number, but for that $650 million that the United States has bought from the EU in pork, the EU has bought $3.2 million from the United States. I mean, that's a tremendous an industry example of the type of offset that's being talked about. So to counteract some of that, the president has put a 27 and a half, I believe, percent tariff on autos and some of those kinds of things going into the EU. And he's put in the stipulation that if and when the EU puts puts forward some legislation to remove some of these trade barriers with the United States, that auto tariff will go down to 15%. So the opportunities there for the EU to latch on to that agreement should they desire to. It sounds like they're willing to explore that, and I think those conversations are going quite favorably. To be honest with you, I just hope we can see them across the finish line again.
This is Farm Your Daily. We will continue our conversation with Brent in just a moment, but first we're going to take a look at the marketplace. And there was a green close for the most part in grains on Thursday. September corn 3 cents higher, 385 and a half. December rising 4 cents, 410 even. Soybeans in September a penny more, 10.28 and a quarter, with November rising half a penny at 10.48. Soybean meal in September $6.80 a ton in the red, $286.30. September wheat 8 cents higher, $5.10 and a quarter cents. December rising 4 and 3 quarters at 5.29. In the livestock market close for Thursday, October live cattle down $2.60 a hundredweight, $236.92. December falling $2.30 at $238.60. Feeder cattle in September $3.60 a hundredweight down, $361.80, with October down $2.67 at $361.52. Lean hogs in October 37 cents a hundredweight in the green, $94.27, with December rising 47 cents at $86.97 a hundredweight. That is the Thursday market close. This is Farm Your Daily. I'm curious about the trade deficit conversation. It is brought up a lot. Why is that an important thing to mention? If there are U.S. products being sold, is it, at least from a pure farm perspective or a farmer perspective, is it really that huge of a deal to have one country be buying more than another country?
Well, so if you look at it, I'm probably self-categorizing our president and our administration a little bit, but I think they see our country and our citizens as a world power and the primary customer to most of these people. So if we're the ones that are buying the most from others, then this president wants to make sure that others are at least reciprocating some of that as we produce vastly more products and tech goods and whatnot than most other countries do. So we consume a lot of that domestically, but the United States is a very unique country in the entire globe where we outproduce our own domestic abilities to consume. And agriculture is a shining example of that. We're as Midwest farmers, we grow much more food than we could ever consume, as in my case as the state of Iowa, and or in the United States. We rely in the agriculture sector on our ability to export our production. It's a major part of our profitability. Anywhere, it depends on the study that you're looking at, but 25 to 30% of the value comes from those goods that are exported. And so to maintain and right size the trade imbalance with some of those countries, I think the president feels like that we've been taken advantage of, and so he's placing these tools in place, renegotiating every agreement that we've got in order to right size that conversation so that we can be traded with, that we can be dealt with fairly on a level basis.
So we do have multiple trade deals going on. We have China, Japan, South Korea, the European Union, a variety of areas where we are looking at trade, and we don't have detailed information exactly on how that's going to pan out. And that kind of coincides with the fact that we have about 4 months now or so, maybe a little bit more, but about 4 months to market this upcoming harvest and this new crop that's coming in. At what level are we reaching a urgent point where we really need from the farm perspective, action made and decisions had before it's too late to market some of the products that we have?
Well, I honestly, in my opinion, I think we're here. The South America is quickly running through their stocks as we start to harvest ours, and that tide's going to change very quickly. Certainly within the next few weeks. We've got, as you well said, we've got a small window where we need to find a place for our domestic production. And in the case of the Midwest, corn and soybeans to a large part. Obviously there's some specialty crops and some significant areas, but the commodities industry is really competitive with the South American production system, and where they get two crops a year, they've got the ability to bring in a lot more acres. Their cost of production many times is less than ours. There's a lot of things lined up in favor of if you're a buyer, why wouldn't you look at South America? And I can absolutely offset a lot of those with consistency, quality, all those things that have historically been the mainstay of the United States production. But ultimately, the opportunity is right now. We need to, and I've told Secretary Rowlands this directly, face to face, and some of the USTR folks, that these frameworks are great. They're good progress, but we need to have a ratchet win. We need to have some wins in these. We need to finalize some of these so that production agriculture can feel some of that momentum moving. Because as you said earlier, I mean, profitability is bad right now in production agriculture for the most part. And the farmers, we've been dealing with that for a number of years. So our runway, our ability to be tolerant of these types of trade discussions is much shorter than it used to be a few years ago when these were started under President Trump's first administration. And I've told Secretary Rowlands that very directly, very pointedly, that agriculture has to have some demand driven correction to the balance sheet. She knows it, and she's working hard on the levers that she can pull to try to make that happen. And on the state side, I'm certainly not one to criticize without action either. Just next week, I'm going to India with the governor of Secretary or Governor Reynolds, excuse me, Secretary of Agriculture Nag, and the commodity groups. We're traveling over to India to continue some trade conversations. And India is one of those that President Trump has got his eye on, but he's also got a conflict with. So we need to hammer out these details and figure out how can we get some of these across the finish line. So as farmers are going to be in their combines very soon, some of them are today as we're recording this, that they know that there's opportunities coming, and it's not all just red ink at this time. So hopefully we put some positivity back into some of those balance sheets moving forward.
Absolutely. And I do think it's good to have a good faith expectation that folks are working hard to make sure that these things are resolved in a timely manner.
Yep.
But one thing that I do want to think of just as an idea, because I'm personally interested in it as well, is I'm thinking of why would someone not have it be as like ASAP? And that could be, well, we want to get a better deal. We want to negotiate a little bit longer. We want to have more opportunities to have better things for everybody involved in this deal. And so I can see someone with that perspective looking at the farm community and going, well, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we did a similar thing and we just had farmer help. We had farmer assistance out and available. Why is that not a good solution or a good option or alternative today,
Yeah.
as that was something that was a position that was taken years ago?
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly true. When we started these conversations under the President Trump's first term 6 or 7 years ago, I think it's 2018 to be exact, but those tough conversations, the the ag trade balance out of the United States went from a perpetually positive nature to near neutral, meaning we were importing just as many dollars in the agriculture sector as we were exporting. And that move from perpetually positive to near neutral was very painful at the farm gate. And that really translated into a lot of those program payments that you're talking about. And, to be honest with you, there was a lot of them. And many of us kind of lost track as to what was this payment for. And so then the facts are that under the Biden administration, that there have been zero trade deals made under the Biden administration. And in that time frame, that national trade balance in the ag sector went from near neutral under Trump to under Biden went negative about $46 billion, meaning we're bringing in $46 billion of food more than we're exporting as a country, meaning we're more reliant now more than ever on others to feed our own domestic consumption. And in a country like ours, we shouldn't be in that circumstance. And so to get back around to your main question, though, the opportunity for farmers to sustain some of these trade conversations 8 years ago really was met with some of those payments. And I've talked to a lot of farmers across Iowa, across the Midwest. Every single one of them says, I want trade, not aid, or some type of flavor of that type of mentality. As independent business owners, as folks who are just happy with their hands in the dirt and their boots in the shop, that kind of thing. The idea that we're reliant on the government to get us to the next year is just not a comfortable conversation, and it honestly, it doesn't look very good. And we're independent. We want to trade. We want to do the right thing. We're good at what we do, and we just want the opportunity to be profitable on our own business merits. And I think we've got some future opportunities there. What's this going to look like from now until we get to that aspect? Time will tell. I certainly don't have a crystal ball. Fortunately or unfortunately, there could be some payments coming in through some of these conversations. There's some of these trade revenues, if you will, have been talked about. A portion of those being ear tagged for consumers or for taxpayers, for farmers, for different segments. So we'll see how that comes to fruition in the next few weeks. But ultimately, I can about guarantee you every farmer rancher across the Midwest, the United States, would sooner fix the problem than deal with ongoing resolutions.
Brent, as we kind of wrap up the conversation here, what would you say are the main priorities then, the main call to action as we wrap up August and head into September trade-wise?
Yeah, well, there are some frameworks that are getting close. So if I were to call to action, people listening to your podcast, have those conversations with your congresspeople, your senators, your representatives. If you've got connections into the administration, whether it be in the USDA or a trade representative, some of those kinds of things, by all means, have those conversations, make those phone calls, make your voice heard, because that urgency is now. We need to make sure that we get some of these frameworks together so that we can return profitability and that production agriculture can get back to business as normal and producing what we're producing, trading with our friends, and finding profitability and tomorrow's farm forecast in the future. So that's what I would ask everybody listening to do. Make your voice heard. Step out of just don't grumble in your own shop and complain about it. Make a phone call and have a conversation.
Brent Johnson is president of the Iowa Farm Bureau, also a farmer here in the state of Iowa. Brent, thank you so much for joining us on Farm Your Daily.
As always, thanks, David.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.